Mia Rose adjusted the strap of her simple cardigan as she tidied the last of the children's toys scattered across the polished floor of the Langford mansion's nursery. The soft glow of a nightlight cast gentle shadows on the walls, a quiet contrast to the grandeur of the rooms beyond. At 28, Mia was a devoted nanny, used to the rhythms of this sprawling estate, yet tonight, an undercurrent of tension hummed beneath her usual calm. Downstairs, in the grand dining hall, the Langfords were hosting one of their private dinner parties, a gathering of affluent guests dressed in shimmering gowns and perfectly tailored suits. Mia had been instructed to keep to herself, her presence known only to the children she cared for. The household hummed with the murmur of polite conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses. Mrs. Langford, a statuesque woman in her early 50s with steely eyes and an air of unyielding authority, kept a watchful eye over the evening. Her smile rarely reached her eyes, especially when she glanced upstairs at Mia. To Mrs. Langford, Mia was the invisible staff member, a shadow in the background, a necessary but negligible presence in her meticulously arranged world. Moments before the dessert course was served, Mrs. Langford's lips curled into a cold smile as she called Mia into the dining hall. "Mia," she said sharply, her voice carrying over the murmur, "you're practically invisible. Perhaps that's best, you're here to be unseen." The room grew quieter as heads turned toward Mia. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, a familiar sting she tried to quell. The children's soft gazes followed her, searching for reassurance in her startled expression. The invisible nanny had just been made painfully visible, and the night was only beginning. Mrs. Langford's words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding, slicing through the warmth of the room and pinpointing Mia Rose with the precision of a cold blade. The laughter from the delicate chandeliers seemed to falter as all eyes briefly flickered toward the young nanny standing awkwardly at the periphery of the sumptuous dining hall. The guests, dressed in their finery, silks, satins, diamonds sparkling against polished marble, watched, some with thinly veiled amusement, others with outright curiosity. A faint tension rippled, like a sudden drop in temperature, unseen yet palpable. "Mia, really," Mrs. Langford said, stepping closer with that same rigid poise she always carried, "you must realize your role here. To blend in, to not become a distraction. Tonight, you are to be invisible. Do you understand?" Mia swallowed hard, her heart thumping loudly in her ears as though it might betray her with its rapid rhythm. "Yes, Mrs. Langford," she murmured, voice low and steady despite the burn crawling up her neck. The sting wasn't just in the words but in the way they were delivered, soaked in disdain and laced with dismissal. As the conversation resumed around them, some of the guests exchanged glances, furtive smiles playing at their lips. Several staff members, discreetly placed along the edges of the room, exchanged sympathetic looks. They all knew of Mrs. Langford's harshness, and how Mia, despite her dedicated service, remained a faint shadow in the glaring spotlight of the Langford family's social cage. Mia's chest felt tight. The children upstairs, whom she cared for deeply, had always been her sanctuary, the bright spots in this vast and often indifferent mansion. But now, with laughter still drifting up faintly from downstairs and the expectation that she remain unseen, she felt smaller than ever. Despite the simmering indignity clawing at her, she finished her tasks efficiently, her hands moving with the quiet grace of routine, but her mind raced. She tried to shake the sharp words as she escorted the youngest child, Lila, to her room, attempting to soften the evening with a gentle smile and a whispered story. Yet even Lila looked up, puzzled by the tension radiating off Mia. Later, as the guests' chatter dwindled and the staff retreated into shadowed corridors, Mrs. Langford appeared by the nursery doorway, arms crossed and an imperious tilt to her head. "Mia," she said sternly, "remain here tonight. Do not turn any lights on. The mansion's peace depends on it. Tonight, you will truly be invisible." Mia blinked, panic flickering momentarily beneath her calm exterior. I understand," she said, although the idea felt impossible. How could anyone remain unseen in a house so vast and filled with silent witnesses? Mrs. Langford's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Good. I trust one won't have to remind you again. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Mia alone in the dim nursery, the shadows deepening with each silent second. She felt the weight of the darkness settling around her, thick and suffocating. The grand mansion, with its high ceilings and ornate decorations, suddenly felt like a labyrinth designed to cage her. Mia sat on a cushioned bench beside the window, hands clenched in her lap. The children's bedtime stories, the whispered lullabies she'd rehearsed countless times, now echoed hollowly in the vast space. She reached for her phone, contemplating calling her closest friend, but hesitated. What would she even say? That she was being ordered to endure a night unseen and unheard in a house that belonged to strangers who formally dismissed her. In the silence, the faint sounds of footsteps echoed distantly through the corridors, perhaps a late guest returning, or the household staff tidying away the remnants of the evening's festivity. Mia shrank into the shadows, trying to make herself as small as possible, wishing she could disappear entirely. The faint flicker of a candlelight from the adjoining hallway caught her eye briefly, and then was extinguished, the flames swallowed by silence. The mansion was eerily still, the usual bustle dampened by unspoken tensions. Her thoughts roiled. She remembered the many times Mrs. Langford had corrected the children by pointing out how neat and proper things must be done. Now, the same woman treated Mia as if she were an error in the family picture, a silent accessory meant to be ignored. The housekeeper, Mrs. Edwards, peeked in quietly a few minutes later. Her eyes held sympathy as she whispered, "Mrs. Langford means well, but she forgets sometimes. Don't let it get to you, Mia. The children love you. That's what matters." Mia offered a small, grateful smile, yet even Mrs. Edwards' kind words couldn't pierce the loneliness that wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. "Thank you. I just wish I could do more than be a shadow here," she whispered. Mrs. Edwards gave a gentle nod before slipping away, leaving Mia once again in the thickening quiet. She ran a hand through her dark curls, feeling the invisible walls pressing in. From her vantage point by the window, Mia caught a glimpse of the night sky, a sliver of silver moon hanging high above sprawling oaks surrounding the estate. The world beyond this imposed invisibility continued, indifferent to the weight she carried alone in this house. Suddenly, faint voices floated up from the main hall, laughter and swirling whispers of social chatter, mingled with clinking glasses and soft music. For a moment, the warmth from those sounds almost engulfed her, but only to remind Mia that she was on the other side of a thick glass wall, separated from life by Mrs. Langford's cold decree. The children, tucked into their beds, stirred in their sleep. Mia moved quietly, her steps almost inaudible on the thick carpet. She checked on each child, smoothing blankets and brushing a stray lock of hair from a sleepy forehead. They did not deserve this coldness, this invisibility forced upon their caretaker. A sharp knock sounded on the nursery door, startling Mia. She opened it slowly, and there stood Mrs. Langford once again, face perfectly composed but eyes hard. "Mia, it's nearly midnight. Remember, the lights remain off." She paused, voice icy but low. "Some things are clearer in the dark." Without waiting for reply, she turned and disappeared into the shadows. Mia closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. This night was an endurance test, a contest of patience and silence. Yet beneath the quiet, something inside her stirred, a fragile but fierce resolve to not simply be invisible. In the vast darkness of the mansion, with only muffled sounds of distant footsteps and occasional murmurs of the night's end, Mia sat silently, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination. Her mind flickered through memories of her life before this job, times when she had performed on stages and captivated audiences with her presence. Now, she was nothing to Mrs. Langford but a ghost meant to haunt corners unseen. Yet, in the silence, Mia promised herself she would find a way to shine, even if in the smallest, most unexpected moments. The house remained shadowed, but inside Mia, a quiet fire had begun to flicker, its warmth growing against the cold night. In the deep quiet of the nursery's darkness, a stillness lingered long enough to become uneasy, like the moment before a storm breaks. Mia Rose sat on the edge of the cushioned bench, the soft rumble of children's breathing filling the room. Though the mansion around her was cloaked in shadows, inside her, a restless energy surged. The night's earlier humiliation twisted in her chest, but she knew she could not let it consume her. She glanced at the moonlight filtering silvery through the windowpane, casting fragmented patterns onto the walls. Inspiration bloomed quietly, fragile but insistent. From her bag, she drew a small flashlight she had tucked away weeks ago, a relic from her old life, when she had been a performer before choosing the quiet world of nannying. The weight of the forgotten times settled on her shoulders like a familiar shawl. A soft click, the beam emitting a gentle glow. But instead of turning on the full beam, Mia angling it carefully, channeling the light to craft delicate shadows dancing on the walls. Suddenly, the invisible had a shape. With the children nestled in their beds, Mia's voice lowered to a gentle, rhythmic cadence, her words spilling sweet and vibrant into the darkened room. She began telling stories of distant lands, brave children, and courage found in the least expected places. Her rich tone painted vivid scenes as her hands moved, crafting shadow puppets that flickered and soared across the walls. A rabbit bounding through a forest. A dragon curling its sinuous body high into the night sky. A queen and her loyal knights marching into a glorious battle. Each figure enchanted, coming alive with the subtle glow of the light and the fluid grace of Mia's movements. At first, Lila stirred, her eyes fluttering open just enough to catch the flickering silhouettes. She smiled softly, a hungry light awakening as the stories wove around her consciousness. Her restless brothers soon followed, drawn from sleep by the gentle glow and the magic in Mia's voice. Even in the enforced darkness, a new warmth grew, seeping into the room and wiping away shadows far heavier than those on the walls. Down the hall, behind slightly ajar doors, the faintest whispers of awe began to stir among the household staff. Footsteps paused, breaths caught, eyes peeking into the dim corridor. From the grand salon, a lingering guest, one the family had expected to remain much longer, heard the soft murmur of storytelling and the faint clatter of shadow puppets. Curiosity tugged against the veil of etiquette as she drifted quietly toward the source. Upstairs, in that quiet room where Mia was meant to remain unseen, the stories blossomed like rare flowers in the night. Her voice wove through the space, steady and sure despite the lingering sting of earlier cruelty. Lila's giggle hung softly in the air, a fragile cheerfulness breaking through the tension, her small hands clapped in delight. For those children, who had watched shadows lengthen and their nanny's confidence waver, Mia's stories became a beacon in the darkness. She was no longer just the invisible employee, she was their champion of wonder, their guardian of dreams. Her hands twisted and turned, shaping symbolism into figures that danced in the glow, not an accessory to the evening's high society spectacle, but a creator of joy. Downstairs, murmurs of surprise met the whispers about the unseen nanny's performance. The guests, initially amused at the Ford's strict treatment, now expressed quiet envy. "Did you hear that?" one guest murmured to another. "Mia isn't invisible after all. She's remarkable." Even some of the staff, who had only glimpsed swift shadows of Mia before, felt a shift. The rumors that she was just a background presence dissolved in the face of her talent, shining unmistakably beyond any curtain of disregard. Her Richard-like voice was steady and strong, an unexpected revelation. Mrs. Langford, who listened from the upper staircase, felt a flicker of surprise that quickly hardened into something colder. The image she had so carefully constructed of invisibility for Mia now unraveled before her very eyes. She clenched her jaw, angry at the intrusion of brightness into the darkness she had imposed. However, as the night wore on, even she couldn't but recognize the value of Mia's presence. The children were calmer, their smiles genuine, illuminated softly by the moonlight and their nanny's magic. The guests' scornful laughter quieted into respectful whispers. Mia's stories finally wound down toward the early hours, shadows shrinking back as dawn threatened. The children, now peacefully asleep, looked more serene than they had all evening. Mia sat quietly, exhausted but fulfilled, her previous feelings of invisibility washed away in a tide of quietly earned respect. She looked out the window once more. The moon was slipping toward the horizon, the first pale blush of morning light brushing the trees. Mia knew this night had changed something. No longer just the invisible nanny, she had revealed her true self, the artist, the storyteller, and the steadfast guardian of children's hearts. Words of her talent began to ripple through the household like a gentle wind, softening hardened judgments and fostering an unfamiliar warmth. She had shown that invisibility was not a prison but a canvas upon which to cast light, even in darkness. As the mansion slowly stirred awake around her, Mia Rose felt a quiet triumph settle within. The invisible had become seen, not by loud announcements or confrontations, but through the quiet strength of creativity and care. The shadows she had been consigned to no longer defined her. She had painted a new story, one where she stood luminous and acknowledged. And somewhere in the deep shadows of the Langford household, a new chapter was just beginning. The soft light of dawn seeped through the embroidered curtains of the nursery, casting a pale glow over the peaceful faces of the children Mia had cared for through the night. In this early morning hush, Mia Rose allowed herself a moment's quiet reflection. The events of the previous evening still pulsed with a vividness that lingered in her mind, a mixture of relief, pride, and a pinch of sadness that the truth about her had been hidden beneath layers of misconception. Before becoming the quiet presence in the Langford mansion, Mia had lived a life she rarely spoke of here, a life framed by the stage lights and applause of theaters far across the country. She had studied performance art at a prestigious conservatory, where days were filled with rigorous rehearsals and nights with the intoxicating thrill of live audiences. Once, she was a dancer, actor, storyteller, a woman who drew eyes and admiration with her poise and vocal grace. It was a life of artistry, connection, and public celebration. But the sudden illness of a beloved relative, followed by the emotional toll of constant travel, had softened her spirit. She had craved a quieter kind of fulfillment, something rooted in genuine care rather than fleeting spotlight. The choice to become a nanny, to embrace a role she could perform with the same passion but in a different arena, was deliberate. It was a leap from the grand stages to the intimate world of childhood, and though the Langford mansion was lavish and imposing, it offered a different kind of stage, a place where patience, creativity, and nurturing mattered far more than spotlight and applause. Her choice to dress simply when reporting for work wasn't an oversight but a shield. Mia didn't want to flash her former life or talents here. She wanted to quietly weave herself into the family fabric, unnoticed in appearances if not in heart. That invisibility had become a double-edged sword, granting her peace but also opening her up to dismissal and scorn. Mrs. Langford's biting remark the night before had unveiled the sliver of prejudice Mia had come to expect but hoped, deep down, to avoid. The coldness in her employer's tone reflected not just a preference for social appearances but a deeper misunderstanding of worth and talent. That raw dismissal sat uneasily with Mia, who had given these children her full self despite the constraints imposed by the household's rigid hierarchy. As the morning sun brushed the high ceilings and intricate moldings of the mansion, Mia quietly stepped into the adjoining sitting room, where the Langford family gathered for breakfast. The air was filled with the clinking of silverware and murmurs of polite conversation. Mrs. Langford sat poised, her expression guarded, a slight shift in demeanor that betrayed some unsettled thoughts from the night before. James Langford, the elder son, a tall, confident man in his early 30s, noticed Mia's entrance. He gave a nod of acknowledgement, a subtle but sincere gesture that suggested a fresh perspective. "Good morning, Mia," he said, his voice warm but measured, a contrast to his mother's cool reserve. Mia returned the greeting with grace, unsure of how much of the previous night's events had already reached the family's ears or erupted behind closed doors. The children, Lila and her brothers, clustered nearby, eyes bright and expectant, the bond between them and Mia unmistakable. A quiet conversation soon unfolded between Mrs. Langford and her husband, William, a distinguished gentleman whose composed demeanor belied the undercurrents of family tensions. Their tones were hushed but carried a new note of respect concerning Mia, a marked departure from the dismissive attitude she had faced before. Later in the day, Mia found a moment alone with Lila in the garden. The child's small fingers traced patterns over the surface of a wooden birdhouse they had built together days earlier, a sign of the deeper connections Mia had fostered beyond her previously unnoticed role. "Did you like the stories last night?" Mia asked softly. Lila's eyes lit with a quiet excitement. "I loved them, Mia. The shadows were like magic. Can you tell me more tonight?" Mia smiled, a warm, genuine curve of her lips. "Of course, Lila. There are many more stories to tell." The garden's fragrant air carried a feeling of renewal, not just for the children but for Mia herself. She was no longer just the invisible figure in the shadows but someone whose presence added color and life to their days. Behind the scenes, whispers among staff began to spread. Conversations in quiet corners spoke of Mia's hidden talents, the surprising depth she brought to her work, and the dignity with which she handled even the toughest nights. The staff's attitudes shifted subtly. What had been indifference began to transform into respect, sometimes even admiration. Mia's reflections returned to her own journey, the sacrifices made, the struggles faced, and the quiet strength found in embracing her true self, even when misunderstood. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Mia pondered the potential crossroads ahead. The warmth and acknowledgement she felt stirred thoughts about her future with the Langfords. Could this household, with its intricate social web, truly embrace a woman whose career had been rooted in creative expression? Would Mrs. Langford soften her rigid judgments, recognizing that value is not always visible in the conventional ways she prized? In these private moments, Mia allowed herself a glimmer of hope, not for grand redemption or sudden transformation but for gradual understanding. She envisioned a place where her gifts could be appreciated, where the children could continue to thrive under her care, and where the invisible boundaries that once confined her might begin to dissolve. Her determination to remain true to herself, to balance humility with quiet confidence, felt more vital than ever. The invisible nanny was becoming seen not by spectacle, but by the everyday acts of kindness, artistry, and undaunted courage she brought to life within these walls. And so, as the sun dipped low and painted the mansion in golden hues, Mia rose prepared to embrace whatever challenges and changes might come, her heart steady and her spirit unyielding, a woman reshaped by shadows, now ready to step fully into the light. The days following that transformative night in the Langford mansion unfolded with a subtle but unmistakable shift in the household's atmosphere. Whispers of Mia Rose's storytelling prowess, once a secret shared only among the children and a few sympathetic staff, circulated more broadly. The household staff exchanged nods of acknowledgement when passing her, a quiet change that spoke volumes after weeks of distant politeness. Mrs. Langford's sharp coldness, too, had softened, unsettled perhaps by the undeniable charm and warmth Mia projected, even if reluctantly. The social circles which had once openly mocked or ignored the nanny began to murmur behind her employer's back, their high society disdain giving way to surprised respect. No longer was Mia invisible, she had left an indelible mark, quietly rewriting the narrative of her place in the house. The turning point came one crisp morning at the Langfords' breakfast table. Mrs. Langford sat rigid, a smile less forced than before lingering on her lips. "Mia," she began, her tone measured but earnest, "it seems I underestimated you. Your dedication to the children, and the talents you revealed last night, have not gone unnoticed." Mia felt a flutter of unease at the unexpected admission. She met Mrs. Langford's gaze steadily and nodded politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Langford. I care deeply for the children, and I want only their best." William Langford, seated nearby, offered a warm smile. "It takes a special person to bring such grace to their work, Mia. We're fortunate to have you here." The words, though formal, carried genuine appreciation. News of this rare acknowledgement traveled swiftly through the household. The staff, once wary of the family's social rigidity, felt encouraged to express their own appreciation more openly. Mrs. Edwards, the housekeeper, approached Mia one afternoon with a small bouquet of garden flowers. "For you, Mia. To brighten your day, as you brighten ours," she said softly, her eyes shining with affection and respect. The children, ever Mia's most ardent supporters, continued to bask in the gentle glow of her attention. Lila, now more confident and joyful than ever, would eagerly await the evening storytelling sessions, where shadows danced and imagination soared. Her brothers, once restless at bedtime, now settled swiftly under Mia's watchful care. One evening, as Mia prepared the nursery for the night, James Langford entered quietly. His usual confident demeanor softened as he addressed her. "Mia, your talents deserve recognition beyond the nursery. If you're interested, perhaps we can discuss a role that better suits your gifts." Mia blinked in surprise, touched by his thoughtful proposal. "I appreciate that, James. My passion lies with the children, but knowing my efforts might be valued means more than I can say." As the days turned to weeks, Mrs. Langford's transformation grew more apparent. The cruel dismissiveness gave way to moments of reluctant respect, and, on occasion, genuine warmth. It was a gradual process, shaped by witnessing Mia's unwavering commitment and the joy she brought into the children's lives. However, the lingering sting of past humiliation occasionally shadowed their interactions. One afternoon, Mia caught Mrs. Langford gazing at her with a conflicted expression. "Mia," she said hesitantly, "I'm sorry for the words I spoke that night. It was unkind, and you didn't deserve it." Mia paused, the offer of apology stirring a complex mix of emotions. "Thank you, Mrs. Langford. That means a great deal." She smiled softly, her own grace and strength shining through. Despite the changes, Mia remained grounded, her resilience evident in every step, every gentle word shared with the children, every moment spent weaving stories into the fabric of their days. The household's transformation echoed beyond its walls. Social guests who had once whispered judgments began to address Mia with newfound respect. At a formal gathering, a prominent society figure praised her artistry, and murmurs of admiration replaced previous snickers. Mrs. Langford, though not prone to public displays of emotion, attended one such event with a subtle but unmistakable air of pride beside her nanny-turned-storyteller. The invisible had truly become seen, not through conflict or confrontation, but through the quiet power of dedication and talent revealed in the right moment. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted golden hues across manicured lawns, Mia lingered in the garden surrounded by the laughter of children. The warmth of the season mirrored the steady unfolding of her journey, a story rooted in resilience, compassion, and unyielding spirit. Mrs. Edwards approached, her steps light and smile genuine. "Mia, you've brought something extraordinary here, a change not just in the children, but in all of us." Mia's eyes sparkled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Edwards. It's been a journey, but I'm honored to be part of this family." Even Mrs. Langford, standing nearby with a serene expression, nodded in agreement. "You've taught me much, Mia. About patience, about seeing beyond appearances. I only wish I had realized sooner." Mia's smile deepened, a balm to the wounds of the past. "We all learn in our time," she replied gently. The Langford mansion, once a fortress of social expectations and invisible divides, had become a place where laughter and light flourished, not because rules changed overnight, but because hearts did. Mia Rose stepped onto the garden path, the soft breeze brushing her face, carrying whispers of new possibilities. Her path, once shadowed and uncertain, now shone with promise, shaped by dignity, courage, and the undeniable power of being truly seen. What would you have done if you were in Mia's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. See you in our next story.